Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is JD PicKell. JD, I've got a lot that I want to get to with you, but we first need to start with something very, very important. Juice Williams.
Yeah, I love it. I love random college football player of the day. I
That's
love it.
He'd be a good one for it too, because like you always remember those names, and it's almost better when someone has a really unique name and they didn't have some long NFL career.
Dude, he's one of those two that, like, for a minute, he kind of put Illinois back into, the national picture of college football. Not that Illinois hasn't been good over the course of, the last few seasons. I mean, heck, a couple seasons ago, they were pushing Michigan to to have a last-second field goal to beat them. But Juice Williams, I remember specifically, like, the USC-Illinois Rose Bowl, and Juice Williams had the visor, and he's like this mobile quarterback. Like, there was a lot to like about that team. I think that was with Rashard Mendenhall. Was that his running back? I think it was.
Aurelius Ben, I think, was his go-to receiver. There's a
Yep.
good random name. He was a big
It was a
deal
squad.
at the time. Yeah, it was. Like they beat Ohio State that year too. That was the big deal for that Illinois team. But you should, like, your idea of just like naming random college football dudes. Like, you don't need my help with YouTube or anything like that. But if you just had a YouTube channel that was devoted to you and just like a few guests each day that just sat down and just named dudes, and people could comment with other random dudes, those numbers would be insane. I think that idea is it's a home run sitting right there for you.
I appreciate that, dude. It's so funny because, like, there's nothing that novel about that concept. Like, there's no like great analysis or insight or like big takeaway besides, like, I don't know what it is, and you can attest to this. Like, the fact that we can literally probably kill an hour to hour and a half just literally naming guys like Juice Williams, Jeremiah Masoli, Nick O'Leary, Rashard Mendenhall. I mean, we go down the list here. Ted Ginn Jr. Like, we just keep going down the list, and it's like it never gets old because the next one you're like, oh, I forgot about this. That's super random. I wonder what he's doing now. But he was a stud back in the day for, insert whatever college football team next.
It's a great activity. Did with my buddies a couple of weekends ago. We're just sitting there for hours on end. People are looking at us like, do you guys just do this all the time? It's like, yeah, this is like when we get on Zoom calls. This is just what we do. We, at the very end of it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm having a kid, or oh yeah, I'm getting married, or something like
Yes,
that.
exactly.
First hour is just strictly naming dudes. It's a fun activity. I got a lot that I want to get to with you. We're going to talk some current college football stuff, but I do want to dig into your story because it's fascinating to me. You were a Swiss Army knife at Cornell, and then you thought, hey, Ivy League degree. Let me just go and do anything I want. Talk college football. Let's just talk pigskin. And you're very, very good at it. Everybody knows that who's listening to this. How in the world did you get started in this field, parlaying that career with, a pretty atypical path? It's not like you were sitting there, doing the Kirk Herbstreit ESPN route, like immediately after playing. You kind of carved out a unique niche for yourself.
Yeah, well, first, that's extremely high praise to let the viewers believe I could have done anything I wanted with that. I mean, I graduated, brother, by like the hair of my chinny chin from that school that I had no business going to in the first place. So, like, shout out to them for getting me into school. Yeah, it's kind of a funny story how it all worked out. Like, to make a long story short, whenever I finished up at Cornell, I had 1 year left of eligibility. And the way that conference works is if you want to use that extra year, whether it's as a senior or whatever, like, you have to do it as a grad or as a undergrad student. You can't graduate and then go get your grad degree in business or X, Y, and Z topic. And so for me, it was like, man, I don't want to unenroll for a semester and try to find something to do. Like, I just want to graduate on time and I'll go walk on somewhere cool. And so a lot of my family had gone to Baylor. I had a best friend at the time that was at Baylor. So I was like, I'll go walk on there. They're kind of up and coming. At the very least, like, I'll have friends there. I'll have people there that I know. So did that for the better part of the summer and got into fall camp, and then had to medically retire before the season even started. So I'm like, I'm in Waco, Texas. I don't really want to do a graduate program and get more student debt. Like, what do I do? And was fortunate to have met the SID at the time at Baylor, Taylor Bryan, during our picture day. He was essentially asking me, hey, what do you want to do when you're done playing football? Like, what's the next thing? Probably just being nice, making conversation. But I said, I'd love to, if I could find a way to be around football in media, like college football specifically, I'd be all about that. And so I retired, and then a couple of weeks later had someone from a digital media outlet in Waco, Texas, reach out to me, Colt Barber, and was like, hey, got your name from someone with Baylor football, heard you're interested in media, do you want to come by and try like a post game show? And I mean, Connor, I promise you, I probably wasn't good, had no idea what I was doing. We filmed it out of like a container that was a makeshift studio, but that sort of parlayed into more opportunities with that company and got to kind of start my own YouTube channel under their umbrella. And then, I mean, you know how the magic of social media, and I guess, you know, the right people saw the right clips, and I was fortunate to kind of get some reps under my belt before getting opportunity with On3. So it's wild how it's all worked. Doesn't make any sense, but definitely very, very perfectly orchestrated. And I'm fired up to get to do it now for a job.
All I heard was Baylor opened more doors for you than Cornell.
There it is. Yeah, that's the one. That's it. That's the big takeaway.
It's pretty awesome though, because it is a good reminder that you can have experience doing X, Y, and Z. You can have all the great internships in the world and stuff like that, and media, and you could feel like you know all these different people. But at the very least, you need passion talking about college football. Anybody that's ever listened to you talk about this sport knows that you have that in spades. That process of like getting that jump though, and being able to go to a place like On3, like what was that moment that you realized like, dude, I can do this. I can talk about this sport and I feel very comfortable doing this.
Yeah, it's funny how it all worked out, because I think for me, the thought was always like, at some point in time, I would love to make that a reality. And because you see guys in the digital media space at that point in time kind of start to get more opportunities, like RJ Young had just signed with Fox. Josh Payton, his meteoric rise was sort of going on at this point in time while I'm trying to build this YouTube channel. And I think the advice that I would give to most people whenever I get to have different conversations with them about, hey, how do I get started with a podcast? How do I get started working in sports? The big thing I've said now for the better part of the last few years is, unless you want to be Reese Davis or Chris Fowler, like I would steer more towards starting your own thing than I would getting into, you know, local media or local TV. And that's not to say anything of those avenues, but it used to be like, okay, I got to get on with the local affiliate for CBS or for Fox or whoever, do the MMJ deal, eventually get into sports, maybe get seen by another market. And then so it's like a, you know, it used to be like a 15, 20-year track where you could maybe get a shot to work for an ESPN or whoever. Whereas now it's like, you got an iPhone, you got access to YouTube. Okay, like, hey, let's get cooking here. Let's buy a cheap mic and let's find a way to make something shake. So I guess to answer your question more specifically, like for me, it was more so, how can I build this channel I'm working on right now and you know, kind of grow in that regard? Because for me, I was still doing an 8 to 5 job at an office. Like I was recruiting for an in-home care company. It was great. It was paying the bills, and I was able to do this on the side a couple of times a week, going on my lunch break and go, you know, shoot some content. And so for me, it was always, how can I keep, you know, getting better, building my audience, building our platform, and was really fortunate to where it came together in a again, a really random and again orchestrated way. But yeah, it was something I think I felt confident in, because like you said, we love college football. I felt like I had a good gauge for things that I was talking about, and it was always on the horizon I had hoped, but to have it become a reality was exciting for sure.
I think you and Josh do such a great job of being extremely neutral voices and being people who just, and I try and embody this as well. Like you just want to be a call it like you see it type person. You need to start like lean into the Ivy League bias, just let that come out in random moments. Like you don't really get to play around with that as much. And it kind of benefits you in that way. And that, you know, I'm sure people, like if you say something nice about the SEC, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'll talk about something else. Is that the one that you get the most though, where people are like, dude, talk about something else that's not just this specific conference, even though you don't have that specific affiliation to it?
Dude, it's so funny that you bring this up, because I actually, before we got on air here, was working on a segment for a future show of like, how real is SEC biased? And the first part of that segment is going to be me just unpacking my background, where I'm like, hey, I didn't go to an SEC school, don't have immediate family went to an SEC school. I grew up in Southern California. Like the SEC bias for me is like, it's kind of a stretch if you want to say that there's some bias there. And I think that the answer I would have to that is twofold. One is, at the end of the day, there is a supply and demand model here when it comes to our business as well as any other business. Like if I run a grocery store and Pop-Tarts are selling out, like I would be an idiot to go say, let's stock up on green beans. That's what the people want. We got to make sure they got green. When it's like, no, they're telling you they want Pop-Tarts. Make sure you give them Pop-Tarts. And so there's one aspect where it is supply and demand, and if people want to have topics around Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, Bama, Tech, like all the SEC schools. It's like, well, okay, we're going to try and meet that demand. The other part of it, I think, is there's an objection a little bit to like this SEC. I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but the SEC bias thought of like, well, they always get benefit of the doubt. They're always, whenever it's close, they always lean the SEC team because the logo. And it's like, well, I see the objection there, but if SEC bias and SEC conspiracy with the media is a real thing, like the NFL draft is in on it because over the course of the last 17 years, the SEC has had the most players drafted. So like gives a little validity to the eye test statement. But again, I go back to just what you were saying about, do you get tired of talking about specific teams? Not really, because I think it really is fun, as you can imagine and could attest to in your same space, like the engagement, the community, and being able to talk to people about what they care about is kind of what makes this whole thing go. So I'd love to talk more Baylor on our show. I'd love to talk more Wisconsin, but at the end of the day, it is supply and demand, and we try and meet that as best we can.
All right, let's talk about your SEC bias here.
Yeah, I love it.
Something that you've been digging into is and I'm not one that really gets into the weeds with verbal commitments anymore. I just think this day and age with the transfer portal and stuff like that, I've kind of explained why that's not really something that's worth my time. But the Kalen Russell thing that happened where he flips from SMU to Bama, I saw it got a lot of reactions. I saw Moscona kind of going off on it, saying, that Bama's, shell of its former self. But like, tell a skeptic why it isn't necessarily an indictment of Kalen DeBoer's recruiting, and that it might more so be a sign that he actually could be hitting his stride with this.
I think the Kalen Russell commitment in a vacuum, you just, like you said, you see that he was committed to SMU. Is that a G5 school? No, it's an ACC school. Okay, so let's put some respect on SMU's name. Also, like Kalen Russell, even though he's committed to SMU, it should tell you a lot about how these services go about evaluating these kids. Like he was still a 4-star cat. He's still one of the top quarterbacks in that 2025 class, regardless of who he was committed to. And so I think Kalen DeBoer being able to land his commitment, to me, just says, okay, now you have the centerpiece of your class. And also, to go back on what I was saying a second ago, Rhett Lashley also knows quarterbacks. So the fact that he was able to recruit and land the Kalen Russell should speak volumes to Kalen Russell even further. I mean, Preston Stone's turned it up at SMU. He was also a guy who had options before he committed to SMU. But Kalen DeBoer now has like a centerpiece for his class, in my opinion, to really recruit behind. Like you see what that guy has under the hood, and you see the ability, and he's also playing big boy football in the state of Texas at Duncanville. Like all of the ability he has, to me, is very evident, and I think is evident to most folks that are, just have a working pair of eyes. And I think that same thing can be said for recruits that are considering Bama and saying, okay, if I go to Alabama, I'm playing with a Kalen Russell. If I'm a receiver, I have someone who can get me the football. If I'm an offensive lineman, I have someone worth blocking for. If I'm a defensive player, I have somebody that I know if we get a 3 and out, we get the ball back to him, like good things are going to happen. And so I think it still is a little bit early for us to know without a shadow of a doubt who Kalen DeBoer is going to be as a recruiter long-term at Alabama. But landing a top 10 quarterback in the class of 2025 in Kalen Russell, regardless of where he was committed before, dude can spin it, dude can play, and I think it's only going to help Alabama going forward here on the recruiting trail. What
is recruiting success for him in a post-Nick Saban world? Because it's not fair to just assume that number one classes are on the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not realistic that there will be a drop-off. It's just, what is it going to look like? But at the same time, Bama should never just be sitting there with a number 13 class in the country. It's probably somewhere in the middle of it, but how do you look at that? Like, what would be him kind of passing that test in his first full cycle?
I think the first full cycle, if you can be in the conversation of a top 5 class, we're in good shape, because it is year one. There's still some people that are going to have question marks around, well, what is Alabama really under Kalen DeBoer? Who are they going to be long-term? And that's fair to have those questions. But I think over the course of the next 2 to 3 seasons, top 5 consistently, if you're winning on the field at the level at which Alabama expects to win at now with this expanded playoff, I feel like that's pretty reasonable. I mean, the resources for Alabama, I think we're going to see really flex their muscle a little bit more in this post-Saban world. People talk about the Nick Saban tax and the Nick Saban discount with the NIL. Maybe that was true, maybe that wasn't, but I promise you now, Alabama, if they want to play ball and they decide to play ball, they got a lot of people in Tuscaloosa, Alabama with some deep pockets that I'm sure would be more than willing to help them acquire some top talent. So my big question really is, for this upcoming season, can they restabilize those optics? Can they answer those questions for some recruits that are maybe on the fence of, well, hey, if I go to Bama, is it still going to be Bama? Is it still going to be a team that competes for conference championships and SEC and national championships? And I just mentioned the SEC. Are they going to still be one of those top tier SEC teams? And so I think success in year one, making the playoff, being at least a 10-win football team, that to me is really what could kind of lay the foundation for success in the future out there in Tuscaloosa under Kalen DeBoer.
What'd you learn from Bryce Underwood after spending a little bit of time with him?
And he's a cool customer. Like, he is one of those guys. So we had, 45 plus of the top high school prospects in the country here. And a lot of those sessions and a lot of those different moments throughout the event, you're just kind of trying to gauge the room, and you're kind of just observing how do these kids interact with each other, and not in a sense of like, I want to try to exactly figure out who they are, but you're just kind of trying to get a gauge for, who guys are gravitating towards. And it felt like, to me, you would look at a crowd and you would look at who was kind of in the middle of those crowds. People just gravitated to Bryce Underwood. Like, he absolutely has the it factor. Seeing him in person, he is every bit of what he's billed as physically. I think he welcomes the pressure of being that top recruit in America. And I'm excited to see what he is at LSU, man, because now we're kind of starting to enter into a world where LSU is sort of developing a pretty strong track record with quarterbacks that have had success across multiple staffs, from Joe Burrow, now with Jaden Daniels and Brian Kelly, and Bryce Underwood could absolutely be the next guy. I was pushing hard for Cornell to stay in the race there. He told me they text him every day. I think he's on some automated system where he gets a text to come and camp with them. Still TBD on that. I'm not holding my breath, but at the same time, we're gonna recruit to the whistle here, Connor.
Just get that internship on Wall Street,
Right.
That's the NIL. Like that play, that's I had Tom Zivikowski, you want to talk about random dudes, had him on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how you can't enforce a summer workout program at an Ivy League program.
Yeah.
When you're like, go do that. That's going to make you more money. That's going to be more beneficial in the long term. I realize Bryce Underwood's got some options, but that's a unique play. I mean, Cornell's got it, others don't.
Yeah, he seems pretty locked in with LSU, but I'm gonna hold out hope until pen meets paper. I'm gonna hold out hope, but LSU is definitely getting a good one with him, man. He's gonna be a stud.
It's interesting to think about how new this conference that we're talking about is going to be this year, and it'll really kind of sink in at media days next month of talking about Oklahoma and Texas and all that stuff. And for those of us that do this on a daily basis, this isn't necessarily that new for us, but it feels like one of the rare dubs of realignment is getting this Texas A&M rivalry back and getting that on the calendar on an annual basis. How soon do you think this will be a top 5 rivalry in the sport? Or is it already there just by virtue of it being back this year?
I think it is a top 5 rivalry in the sport. I'm trying to think where I would put it ahead of. I think a lot of it, too, has to do with the health of this rivalry. Like, if Mike Elko can get A&M rolling, like, this is going to be must-see television. I mean, it's going to be must-see television regardless, but it's going to have more of a national draw to it year in and year out if Elko can kind of get things rolling and if Sark can keep things rolling out there in Austin. The thing I love about it, too, is, like, even though we haven't had this game played since, 2011, there's been zero love lost between either of these fan bases. I understand they played in other sports, but, like, the chirping that goes on social media, and Connor, I know you see it firsthand, like, it is as if they were playing every single day, like, between these two fan bases on Twitter and in the comment section. Like, it is like next door neighbor kind of hate. And the impact I'm most curious to watch here as they start playing over the course of the next couple of seasons is what happens on the recruiting trail. Because how often have we seen A&M and Texas be down, for the final 2 for a top recruit in the country? If A&M starts winning on the field and maybe gets a couple of wins over Texas on the field, does that swing the pendulum back towards A&M as being a national power? That's probably putting the cart before the horse a little bit there, but that to me will have the largest ripple effect. And one more thing I would say about this too, I don't think we're that far removed from this game being like a key box that a head coach from A&M or a head coach from Texas has to check, in the same way that Ohio State and Michigan, a head coach has to win that game. And so you can be undefeated going into that game, but if you lose that game too many times in a row, going to make some people very unhappy and could arrive in some pretty uncomfortable situations, kind of like we're talking about with Ryan Day right now. So I think, to answer your question, is a top 5 rivalry for me? Absolutely.
Yeah, you can find different moments in which that's been an unequivocal yes. Like there's no debate about it whatsoever, and it does depend on both teams. Obviously, being up to the task and actually looking like they're capable of competing for playoff spots and doing all those things. It's preseason prediction time. You try and come up with a few of these where you got the crystal ball and you're kind of trying to figure out like, all right, what are my upsets here? What are my upsets there? What the storylines that are going to follow? What odds do you give A&M to play spoiler in that game this year? In that game against Texas, where Texas could have everything on the line going into College Station for the first time in forever, hostile atmosphere it's going to be. Do you give A&M an actual shot to be able to pull off that upset year one? And I'm saying is it an upset as we're sitting here talking about in June,
Sure.
but it feels like something crazy would have to happen for that not to be considered an upset.
Oh, yeah, well, 110%. Like, I think the fact that it's at Kyle Field, too, and who knows what's going on at the end of that season for A&M and what's going on at the end of the season for Texas. But assuming that Texas has a lot to play for, assuming A&M is, let's just for the sake of this conversation, say they're sitting there right around 7-4. So a win puts you at 8, a loss puts you at 5 losses. I promise they would hate to go 7-5 that first year under Elko, as would any team. But I think there will be a strong sense of y'all forgot about us. Y'all thought you were better than us. You guys came to the SEC and thought you were just going to roll through here. And I think there's going to be a very, very big trying to get back factor when it comes to A&M and Texas, and the Aggies trying to really prove a point with Texas' first year in the SEC. So I think that one's going to be close. To me, that gives me like Iron Bowl vibes, where it doesn't really matter what's going on with either team. Something weird is probably going to be in effect. You probably delete logic from the file for that week when it comes to breaking down that game. Also, A&M's got a quarterback. Like, I think Connor Wegman, from what we've seen from him in small doses, is good enough to make you feel like, okay, if he's on, we're going to have a chance, regardless of who we're playing against. So there's a lot of ifs and buts. I know it's a long way away, but A&M, I absolutely give a chance. And if A&M has something to play for even further, Connor, could you imagine if we get that game for a playoff spot for A&M? I think that would be all the makings of what we need for college football with the return of that rivalry.
If they were both, yeah, they would. A&M would have to be sitting there at 9-2, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe Texas also 9-2 or 10-2. Everybody's talking about the games that are going to be taken away and the significance of them, but that could actually be. You're exactly right. If that does indeed play out, A&M does what few people think is possible in year one under Elko. It would be fascinating to see. I'm struggling with whether or not I want to pick Texas to win a national championship this year, which that in itself feels like a testament to Sark and the job that he's done, and really the year 3 that he had. Where do you stand overall on Texas when you maybe will get some people are like, hey, they're going to struggle with the grind of the SEC. This is going to be much different than the Big 12. And at the same time, realizing that you don't do what Texas did in Bama last year just by chance. That's not a fluke to win in the fashion that they did. Are you putting them into that absolutely shortlist national championship type team? If Georgia doesn't win it, maybe it would be Texas.
Yeah, I definitely do right now for a couple of reasons. I think they have been building with the SEC in mind from a roster perspective, and you lose 2 All-Americans on the defensive line. There's no way to just snap your fingers and say that's no big deal. That will be a factor, but I think they've stockpiled in the trenches over the course of these last few cycles and also using the portal to put themselves in position to still be successful in the SEC. And the big thing for me, too, is like how often do we talk about Texas and the culture problems and the underachieving because of those culture problems? Like, when I watched Texas, especially last season, I didn't see culture issues. Now, it's a new locker room. You brought in new guys, but at the exact same time, a lot of those leaders are still there. Talking about Quinn Ewers, Alfred Collins will have to step up and be a guy for you. But like the majority of those guys that were a part of that national championship or that college football playoff team last year, it's going to compete for national championship this year, are still in that locker room. And the thing with me around Texas is there were so many instances a season ago where we could have seen bad culture show up. You go into Tuscaloosa, it's a big game, it's college game day, everyone's watching. Do you faint at the moment of truth? End up winning that game. And then the question is, will you come out of that game? How do you handle success? We're able to have success. They go and play Oklahoma. Tough loss. Do the wheels come off the wagon now for Texas after you lose a game you weren't supposed to in a rivalry game? They kept on winning. They lose their quarterback. Okay, do you mail it in with your leader out of the lineup? Kept on winning, found ways to win with defense. So last year's team is not this year's team, but I do think Steve Sarkisian and the culture and values he solidified out there in Austin, I think that's going to pay dividends when you put it together with that roster they currently have. So I absolutely would buy stock as Texas as a national title contender in 2024. I don't think last year was a fluke at all.
I want to get you out of here with a little bit of rapid fire. Just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Love it. Love it.
All right. This one's near and dear to your heart. Is Capri Sun the clear number 1 juice box? Or, and I'm going to date myself saying this, I don't care, do Mondo squeezers count? Even though I'm pretty sure they're discontinued. You might be able to get them on eBay somewhere, but I don't think you can just go to the grocery store and get a Mondo.
Quick question. Does Sunny D factor into this conversation?
Can you get Sunny D in a juice box, or is it just the big carton?
I think it's the little bottle. It's like juice box size.
Okay. It's juice. I think that kind of is Sunny D better than Capri Sun, I guess is the question.
Yeah. For me, the sugar rush you get from a Sunny D, especially on a high UV kind of day, I will lean Sunny D. But if that's, if there's someone watching who says that's absolute ridiculousness, get it out of there. Capri Sun has stood the test of time. It is proven. It is nostalgia in a pouch. I will absolutely lean Capri Sun if Sunny D is not a variable that we can account for there.
If you could put Sunny D in Capri Sun's packaging, you have the perfect drink.
Done.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, if Clemson is Chick-fil-A and USC is In-N-Out, who is Taco Bell now that we don't have Pac-12 after dark? Is it just like a Mountain West team that scores a lot of points, like a UNLV or something like that?
That's tough, man. Taco Bell. I heard. So in the comment section, someone compared Notre Dame to Taco Bell with a strong start and maybe not as good of a finish. Like maybe later you don't feel as good with Taco Bell. I thought that made a lot of sense, but I think Notre Dame's going to kind of stand the test of time. I like where your head's at with like G5 school, scores a lot of points. Give me Boise State with Taco Bell. I think Boise State's a lot of fun, kind of fun branding. That's a not very thought through answer for you, but I'll go ahead and say Boise State is got the Liv Moss action on.
Yeah, got to just be playing late. That's the key.
Yeah.
You can't just be playing. No Big Ten team is eligible to be Taco Bell. That's just
yes, 100%.
Give me the take that you're thinking about pulling the trigger on next month at SEC Media Days. That you're just kind of like sitting there going, man, I just kind of told you mine with whether or not I'm going to have Texas winning a national championship, but there's always that one that you're like, can I go there? Do I have enough juice to be able to make this work? There's probably one that's just kind of trickling around in your mind right now.
Yeah, I think there's 2, and I know you want to go rapid fire here, so I'll go. I think Tennessee, if Nico hits the ground running, which is a massive if for a first-year starting quarterback in that conference, I think they could be a playoff team. I think the roster is better than it was last year. I think the weapons are better than it was last year. If Nico is early on who we expect him to be long-term, I think Tennessee's a playoff team. I'm not sure what to make about Auburn. The more I look at them, the more I like their situation. I know Peyton Thorne is still kind of a like, hey, show me something. Show me that I can trust you to be the guy back there pulling the trigger. I think Auburn could be a 9-win football team. I feel better about the Tennessee take than I do the Auburn take, but I think there's a lot of pieces there for Auburn to surprise some folks this year.
How are you doing with your Iamaleava pronunciation?
Dude, we've been working on it for a while here because I'm fortunate to be in a setting in a digital media space where like we have people that specialize in recruiting as well. So I can go and talk to them and be like, hey, Iamaleava. Okay, good. So I feel good about it. Week 1's going to come and be the true test of how we're faring. But I think right now, if we say it a couple times a day and we do it once or twice a show, we'll get the good reps. Feel quality about it right now, but again, we're gonna find out here in week 1.
Tagovailoa and Uiagalelei, I must have said like 10 times per day leading up to their first seasons as starters, just so that I felt confident enough to say it with my chest. I'm at that place with Iamaleava at this point, and that's my biggest win of the offseason as far as I'm concerned.
I think we're all developing like different facial muscles from having to say those names over the course of these last few seasons in college football to where like we're going to have different looking jawlines here, Connor. By the time these guys' careers wrap up, we're going to have said Uiagalelei with Mateo at Oregon, Iamaleava at Tennessee. Like we're going to be, I'm just saying, brother, I think it's going to sharpen the jawline up for everybody.
We earn our paychecks here. That's what we do.
There it is.
That's what we do. Over under 2 more titles for Kirby at Georgia.
Over. I think he recruits so well. Georgia's not going anywhere with what they do on that side of things. And then the culture too, like they have a resume now that speaks for itself to where if you trust the process here, even if you're a 5-star, you go play scout team for a year, maybe you're with the twos for a season. Like I understand the NIL instant gratification world, but I think Kirby Smart is going to retain more than he loses in terms of what he wants to keep on his roster. I think they're going to be a machine yet again this year. Connor, I know this isn't prediction season just yet, but I'm going to have a hard time picking against Georgia to win it all this year.
Me too. That's why I wanted you to talk me into Texas.
Hey, a Georgia-Texas final, a little rematch action from what we get October 19th. That could be fun.
If they play
little rematch, that'd be a good time.
They could play each other 3 times this year.
How crazy is that, dude?
I'd be here for it. 3 different locations, be able to have that game. That'd be fun. That'd be awesome. Okay, last one for you. What's the biggest sign that someone isn't program worthy? Or rather, let me rephrase that. What's the biggest sign that someone isn't program worthy and is more program worthy?
That's a tremendous question. I think there's a couple of red flags that you look out for. One is that you're okay with the national title game being played on Monday. To me, I feel like that is a layup for most college football fans that it should be Saturday. And there's people in the comment section that say, okay, go cry about it some more. That's what I'm doing right now. I am doing my best to essentially cry about the game not being on Saturday and being on Monday. I think the other thing is not being program worthy or not being a program guy is like you just sort of enjoy college football during the season, which is great. And we love you for that. But when you go away from the sport and assume that there's nothing else happening for the entirety of the year, like we're now in a world where we get to talk college football with the transfer portal, with spring football, with fall camp, with with recruiting, like college football being a year-round sport. So if you don't consume it in that sense, we still love you. But to be program, status, I think you got to be a year-rounder.
Not to borrow this too much from Josh Pate, but you say off-season if you're program, and if you are program, there is no off-season.
On the money. Josh Pate, program guy too. So, there you go. It's one and the same.
Are you Pate State worthy? Has that crossover happened yet?
I think that's probably a question for Josh. I would like to think so, but again, it's not my my metric, so I'll leave that for him. But I do appreciate the way that he goes about assessing the Pate State material thing. So I would say I agree with most of his standards when it comes to assessing that kind of material. And, we're going to let him kind of be the judge on that one.
JD, this has been great, man. I really appreciate it. I'm sure I'll see you at SEC Media Days in Dallas next month.
Let's do it. Hey, it's next month. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's already next month. I feel like Michigan just won it all.
It's beautiful, man. When the offseason flies, that's about all we can ask for. Oh, I said offseason. That's program.
I'm with you. The offseason is a thing. Like there is a part of the year where they don't play a game. So I'm with you on that. I think there's some wiggle room with that. I'm with you, brother.
Yeah, I'll text Josh and be like, you need to stop getting me into trouble every time I say that word. Yeah, we're good.
Oh man. Awesome. Thanks again, Connor, for having me on, man. You have a great show, and this is awesome. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Thanks, man. Means a lot.